I remember the exact moment I first questioned the lights. It was a Tuesday evening in late October, the kind of night where the air hangs heavy with the scent of fallen leaves and distant wood smoke. Our street in Willow Creek was as still as always, rows of tidy two-story homes with manicured lawns, the occasional porch light flickering on as families settled in for the night. I'd just pulled into my driveway after a long shift at the local hardware store, the engine of my old Ford ticking as it cooled. That's when I glanced down the block, past the identical mailboxes and the empty sidewalk, to the house at the very end. Every window glowed, not the warm, inviting kind of glow from a family dinner or a TV screen, but a steady, unblinking white, like the place was holding its breath. No shadows moved inside, no cars in the driveway, just those lights burning through the dusk as if they had no intention of ever going out. I shook it off, of course, grabbed my keys and headed inside, the screen door creaking behind me. Willow Creek had always been that way, predictable, almost soothing in its sameness. I'd moved here 5 years ago, right after Sarah and I split, needed a fresh start, somewhere quiet where the biggest excitement was the annual block party or the high school football games on Friday nights. My house was a modest ranch style. Nothing fancy, beige siding, a small backyard with a grill I barely used, and a one-car garage cluttered with tools from work. Inside, the living room smelled faintly of takeout pizza from the night before, and the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound breaking the silence. I'm Mark Harlan, 38, the guy who fixes leaky faucets and recommends the best paint for covering up wall scuffs. Single, no kids, just a golden retriever named Buddy who greets me at the door with the enthusiasm of someone who's forgotten I left. That night I fed him, microwaved some leftovers, and sank into the couch with a beer, flipping on the local news. The weatherman droned on about a cold front moving in, but my mind kept drifting back to that house. The Andersons used to live there. Nice folks, retired, always waving from their porch, but they sold last spring, packed up their RV, and headed south for warmer weather. The place had sat empty since a for sale sign fading in the front yard. Real estate in Willow Creek moves slow. No one wants to rush into buying when the market's steady but not booming. By 10 o'clock, the street outside had gone dark. Porch lights winked off one by one, and the only glow came from the faint blue of bedroom windows. I let Buddy out for his last walk, the leash loose in my hand as we strolled the cracked sidewalk. The air was crisp, carrying the distant rumble of a truck on the highway that bordered our suburb. That's when I noticed it again. From halfway down the block, the end of the street looked like a beacon. Every window in that house, upstairs, downstairs, even the ones in the attic gables, poured light onto the lawn. No flicker, no variation. It was as if someone had flipped every switch in the place and walked away. Buddy tugged at the leash, uninterested, sniffing at a fire hydrant. I stood there a minute longer, squinting into the darkness. Probably just the realtor showing it after hours, I thought. Or maybe squatters, though that wasn't the sort of thing that happened in Willow Creek. We had neighborhood watch signs at every corner, and old Mr. Jenkins next door called the cops if a stray cat wandered too far. Shrugging, I headed back home, locking the door a little firmer than usual. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds, chasing away any lingering unease. I brewed coffee in the kitchen, the machine gurgling like an old friend, and scrolled through my phone while Buddy ate his kibble. Work called. Another day of stocking shelves and chatting with regulars about the best way to winterize their sheds. As I backed out of the driveway, I gave the street a casual glance. The house at the end looked ordinary in the daylight, peeling white paint on the trim, overgrown shrubs hugging the foundation. The for sale sign tilted slightly in the grass. No lights visible, of course, just a quiet, empty place waiting for new owners. But that evening, driving home with a bag of groceries from the diner on Main Street, it hit me again. The sun had dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples, and there it was, lights on, every single one. I slowed the car, idling at the stop sign halfway down the block. From this angle, I could see the front door was shut tight, no wreath or welcome mat to soften the entrance. The driveway was bare, weeds pushing through the cracks in the concrete. Who leaves lights on like that? It wasn't just wasteful, it felt deliberate, like a signal. I pulled into my garage and carried the bags inside, setting them on the counter with more care than necessary. Buddy whined at my feet, sensing my distraction. "It's nothing," I muttered, unpacking the milk and bread. But as I ate dinner, a sandwich wolfed down standing up. My eyes kept flicking to the window. The curtains were drawn, but I could picture it, that unrelenting glow cutting through the night like a watchful eye. Later, as I washed dishes, a soft creak echoed from the backyard, probably the fence settling or Buddy shifting in his sleep. Still, I dried my hands and peered out the kitchen window. The street was empty, sodium lamps casting long shadows, and at the end, unchanging, the lights, steady, silent. That night, sleep came fitfully. I lay in bed, the ceiling fan whirring overhead, listening to the house settle around me. Around 2 a.m., a distant hum pulled me awake. Not the fridge, but something outside. Thunder. No, the sky was clear when I'd checked the forecast. I sat up, heart picking up a notch, and padded to the window. The street was a void of black, save for that one spot, the house, lights blazing as if it had been waiting for me to look. I told myself it was the wiring, some short that kept the fixtures on. Or maybe the new owners had moved in quietly, forgetting to draw the blinds. But deep down, a sliver of doubt took root. Why that house? Why always on, no matter the hour? And why did it feel like, just for a second, one of those windows was staring back? The days blurred into a routine that felt increasingly fragile, like a pane of glass with a hairline crack you pretend isn't there. Wednesday morning, I woke to the insistent beep of my alarm. The room bathed in the soft grey of dawn, filtering through the half-open blinds. Buddy was already at the foot of the bed, his tail thumping against the comforter, oblivious to the shadows that had clung to my thoughts overnight. I swung my legs over the side, feet hitting the cool hardwood floor, and rubbed the sleep from my eyes. The house at the end of the street lingered in my mind, but daylight had a way of shrinking worries down to size. I made eggs on the stove, the sizzle and pop grounding me, and ate standing at the counter while scrolling through emails from work, orders for insulation and storm windows. The usual prep for the colder months ahead. Driving to the hardware store, I took the long way around the block, telling myself it was to avoid the morning traffic on Main Street. But really, I wanted to see the place in the full light of day. Willow Creek streets were waking up, kids in backpacks waiting for the yellow school bus at the corner, a jogger in neon gear pounding the pavement, the distant chime of the ice cream truck already making its rounds, even though it was barely 8. The house came into view at the end of my street, looking as unremarkable as ever. The for sale sign caught a glint from the rising sun, and the windows stared blankly, reflecting the empty lawn and the skeletal branches of the oak tree out front. No movement, no sign of life. Just an abandoned shell, waiting. At the store, the day passed in a haze of customers and inventory. Old Mrs. Hargrove came in for birdseed, chatting about her feeders attracting more squirrels than finches this year. I nodded along, stacking bags in her cart, but my mind wandered back to those lights. By noon, I'd convinced myself it was nothing, a faulty timer maybe, or the realtor leaving them on to make the place look lived in during showings. Willow Creek wasn't the type of town for ghost stories. We had potlucks and PTA meetings, not hauntings. Still, when I grabbed lunch at the diner across the street, a turkey club and black coffee, I found myself staring out the window toward home, half expecting to see a glow even in the afternoon sun. That evening, The unease crept back in slowly, like fog rolling off the nearby creek. I got home around 6, the sky already deepening to indigo, and unloaded my truck with the new shipment of lumber. Buddy bounded out to greet me, circling my legs as I hauled the planks into the garage. The street was quiet, neighbors calling goodnights over fences, the faint laughter from a backyard barbecue 2 houses down. I paused at the edge of my driveway, keys in hand, and looked down the block. There it was again, the house outlined in that unnatural white light, every pane a rectangle of brightness against the gathering dark. From this distance, it looked almost festive, like Christmas decorations left up too long. But there was no warmth to it, no holiday cheer, just a cold, mechanical insistence. I shook my head and went inside, flipping on the kitchen light to chase away the chill. Dinner was simple: grilled cheese and soup from a can, eaten at the small table by the window. I kept the curtains open this time, telling myself I was being ridiculous. Why hide from an empty house? As I chewed, a flicker caught my eye. Not in the house at the end, but closer. Across the street, Mr. Jenkins was out watering his azaleas, the hose snaking across his lawn like a lazy river. He waved, and I waved back, forcing a smile. Normal, everything normal. But as the night deepened, the small things started to pile up. Around 9, I settled into the living room with a book, a thriller about a missing person in the Midwest. Ironic choice. And Buddy curled up on the rug. The words blurred after a few pages. My gaze kept drifting to the front window. The streetlights hummed faintly outside, casting pools of yellow on the sidewalk, and beyond them, the beacon, steady as ever. I got up once, twice, peering through the glass. No cars passed, no dogs barked, just that glow, unwavering. Then came the sound. It started as a low murmur, like wind through the eaves. But there was no breeze. I froze, book forgotten in my lap, straining to listen. It was coming from the backyard. A rhythmic tapping, soft but persistent, like fingers drumming on wood. Buddy's ears perked up, and he lifted his head, whining low in his throat. "Easy, boy," I whispered, standing slowly. The clock on the wall ticked louder in the silence. I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer, not for danger, just curiosity, and eased open the back door. The yard was a patch of overgrown grass and a wooden fence that separated us from the neighbors. Moonlight silvered the edges, but the beam from the flashlight cut through it cleanly. Nothing. The tapping had stopped, replaced by the chirp of crickets. Probably a branch against the house, I thought, sweeping the light over the fence, but as I turned back, something caught in the periphery. A shadow shifting at the far end of the yard, near the gate. I swung the beam around. Empty. Just the silhouette of the shed, tools leaning against the wall like forgotten soldiers. Shrugging it off, I locked the door and double-checked the deadbolt on the front. Paranoia, that's all. The house was playing tricks on me, or maybe the lack of sleep was. I poured a glass of water and stood at the sink, staring out into the night. The view down the street was unobstructed from here. My own porch light, the Jenkins darkened windows, and then it. The light seemed brighter tonight, almost pulsing if you stared too long. Or was that my imagination? I blinked hard, and for a split second, I swore I saw a silhouette in one of the upstairs windows, tall, motionless, like someone standing just inside the glass. My heart stuttered, but when I looked again, it was gone. Empty frames, pouring light onto the unkempt yard. I backed away from the sink, glass trembling in my hand, and turned off all but the nightlight in the hall. Bed felt safer. The covers pulled tight. Buddy joined me, his warm bulk a small comfort against the quiet. Sleep came in fits, dreams fragmented with glowing windows and tapping shadows. Sometime after midnight I woke to a different noise, a faint click, like a door latch giving way, not in my house but distant, echoing down the street. I lay still, breath shallow, listening. The clock glowed 1:47. Outside, the world was hushed, but in my mind the pieces started to shift. The lights weren't just on, they were waiting. And now, something else was moving in the dark. I didn't get up this time, just pulled the blanket higher and told myself it was the neighbor's cat, or the wind settling the gate. But doubt had taken deeper root, twisting like vines around my thoughts. What if the house wasn't empty after all? What if it had been watching me all along? Thursday morning arrived with a deceptive clarity, the sun slicing through the bedroom curtains like a promise of normalcy. I lay there for a moment, staring at the ceiling, the remnants of that midnight click still echoing in my ears. Buddy stirred beside me, his paws scratching lightly against the sheets as he stretched. The house was quiet, no tapping, no hums, just the steady drip of the faucet in the bathroom down the hall. I pushed myself up, muscles stiff from a night of shallow sleep, and padded to the window. The street stretched out below, bathed in early light, dew glistening on the lawns, a paperboy pedaling his bike along the curb, tossing rolled-up news onto porches. At the end, the house sat dormant, windows dark and lifeless, as if the night had never happened. I shook it off like morning fog, brewing coffee strong enough to burn away the doubts. The kitchen felt smaller today, the counters cluttered with yesterday's mail and Buddy's empty bowl. Work waited, another shift at the hardware store, where the fluorescent lights and chatter of customers would anchor me back to reality. I whistled for Buddy, clipped on his leash, and we headed out for a quick walk before I left. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of pine from the woods beyond the neighborhood. We turned left at the corner, away from the end of the street, but my eyes betrayed me, flicking back over my shoulder. Nothing unusual, just the ordinary facade of a place no one wanted. The store was busier than expected, a steady stream of locals prepping for the weekend's chill. I spent the morning in the lumber aisle, measuring cuts for a father-son duo building a treehouse, their excitement a stark contrast to the knot in my gut. "You got kids?" the dad asked, wiping sawdust from his hands. I forced a chuckle. "Nah, just the dog. Keeps me company." He nodded, clapping me on the shoulder, and they moved on. By lunch, I'd pushed the house to the back of my mind, grabbing a sub from the deli next door and eating it on a bench outside, watching traffic crawl along the highway overpass. Willow Creek's rhythm was steady, the bank across the street with its drive-through line, the library's flag snapping in the breeze, the distant wail of a siren that turned out to be an ambulance heading to the clinic. But as the afternoon wore on, the doubts resurfaced, subtle at first, like a whisper you can't quite place. It started with a customer mentioning the old Anderson place. "Heard it's still on the market," she said, browsing the paint swatches. "Kinda creepy how it's just sitting there, huh? Lights on all night like it's haunted or something." My hand paused on the color cards, heart skipping. "Lights? You seen that?" She shrugged, selecting a neutral beige. "Neighbor told me. Says it's been like that since they left. Probably the electric company's fault, but still." She trailed off, paying and leaving with her gallon in hand. I stared at the door after her, the bell jingling like a warning. The rest of the shift dragged, my mind replaying her words. Was it common knowledge now, or just small-town gossip, the kind that filled quiet afternoons at the diner? I clocked out early, citing a headache, and drove home with the radio low, some classic rock station murmuring about lost love. The sun hung low as I turned onto my street, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers toward the end of the block. I gripped the wheel tighter, slowing as the house came into view. In the fading daylight, it looked almost peaceful. Shutters hanging straight, the "for sale" sign catching the last rays. No glow yet, not until full dark. Inside, I busied myself with chores. Mowing the small strip of lawn out front, the engine's drone drowning out stray thoughts. Buddy chased the clippings, his barks sharp and joyful. Neighbors waved from their driveways, Mrs. Ellis walking her poodle, Mr. Jenkins tinkering with his mailbox. "Evening, Mark," he called, and I nodded back, wiping sweat from my brow. Normal, reassuring even. But as I coiled the extension cord in the garage, a chill settled despite the exertion. The sun dipped below the tree line, and I glanced down the street one last time. Twilight blurred the edges, but already faint outlines of light seeped from the windows. Early, too early, dinner was takeout from the pizza joint on the edge of town. Pepperoni with extra cheese, eaten straight from the box on the couch. The TV flickered with a baseball game, commentators' voices a low buzz, but I barely registered the score. Buddy dozed at my feet, his snores syncing with the rise and fall of my breathing. Around 8, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I stood parting the curtains just enough to peer out. The street had settled into night, porch lights on, a few cars humming past on their way to the highway, and there at the terminus the house blazed. Not just on, intensified, as if the bulbs had been swapped for something brighter. Every window framed a void of white, spilling onto the porch and driveway like spilled milk. I let the curtain fall, but the image lingered, burned into my retinas. Pacing the living room, I poured a second beer, the cold fizz grounding me. It was the wiring, had to be, or vandals, kids messing around after school. Willow Creek had its share of bored teenagers, spray-painting underpasses or tipping cows on farms out by the creek. But this felt different, methodical, unyielding. I sat back down, forcing myself to watch the game, but midway through the 9th inning, the unease twisted into something sharper. A repetition, like a loop I couldn't escape. Lights on, glance, lights on, the pattern of my days fracturing around it. Then the phone rang. Landline, the one I hardly used anymore. The trill cut through the room like a knife. I stared at it on the side table, the caller ID flashing unknown. Probably a telemarketer or the store with a forgotten shift detail. I let it ring twice more before picking up. Hello? Static hummed on the line, then a click, disconnected. I set the receiver down slowly, a prickle crawling up my neck. Coincidence. But as I turned back to the window, drawn like a moth, the light seemed to pulse once, subtle, almost imperceptible, or was it the street lamp flickering? I rubbed my eyes, backing away. Sleep was a lost cause that night. I lay in the dark, the clock's digital glow marking the hours. 11, 17, 12, 03, 1, 29. Buddy shifted restlessly, his warmth a small barrier against the isolation creeping in. The house wasn't just lit, it was aware, mirroring my vigilance. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those windows, empty yet expectant. Around 3, the tapping returned, not from the backyard this time, but closer, like nails on glass from the front room. I bolted upright, straining to hear over my pounding heart. Scratch, scratch, pause. Scratch, scratch, pause. Buddy growled low, hackles rising. I didn't move, just listened, breath held, as the sound faded into the night. When dawn finally grayed the sky, I rose exhausted. The doubt no longer a sliver but a chasm. The house at the end wasn't empty. It was inviting me to see, and part of me, against every instinct, wondered what would happen if I finally walked down there. Friday dawned with a reluctance that matched my own. The sky over Willow Creek, a flat expanse of grey that pressed down on the rooftops like a held breath. I hadn't slept more than an hour straight, the tapping from the night before replaying in my head like a stuck record. Buddy was already up, nosing at the bedroom door, his usual morning energy a reminder that the world outside didn't care about my unraveling nerves. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, the floorboards cool under my feet, and rubbed the stubble on my jaw. The mirror in the bathroom showed a man I barely recognized, eyes shadowed, lines etched deeper around my mouth. Just fatigue, I told myself. Nothing more. Coffee helped, black and scalding, poured into a mug that steamed against the chill seeping through the kitchen window. I stood there sipping it, staring out at the backyard where the grass lay flat and dewed, undisturbed. No signs of whatever had made that noise last night. Work was out of the question today. I'd called in sick the moment my feet hit the floor, my voice rough over the phone as I mumbled something about a stomach bug. The store manager didn't push. Small-town courtesy. Or maybe he could hear the strain. Now the house was mine for the day, a reluctant prisoner to my own suspicions. I let Buddy out, watching him trot the perimeter of the fence, pausing to sniff at the gate, as if he remembered the shadows, too. The street beyond was stirring slowly, a minivan backing out from the house next door, its taillights blurring in the mist. The faint clink of a garbage truck down on Main Street. I avoided looking toward the end, busying myself with breakfast, a bowl of cereal that tasted like cardboard. But curiosity, that insidious pull, won out. I grabbed my jacket from the hook by the door, keys jingling in my pocket, and stepped onto the porch. The air was thick, laced with the earthy scent of impending rain, and the neighborhood felt hushed, as if everyone else had decided to sleep in. Walking Buddy gave me purpose, a leash in one hand and the morning paper tucked under my arm. We headed right this time, circling the block to approach from the side street, the one that ran parallel to the highway's distant hum. Trees lined the way, their leaves rustling softly in a breeze that carried the faint tang of exhaust from passing semis. My steps slowed as the end of my street came into oblique view through a gap in the hedges. The house sat there, unlit in the overcast light, its silhouette stark against the grey. The for sale sign leaned a little more, weeds clawing up around its base. From this angle I could see the side yard, overgrown with a rusted swing set half buried in the tangle. A remnant from the Andersons' grandkids, maybe. No movement, no glow, just vacancy. Buddy pulled ahead, eager for the open space near the creek trail, and I let him lead. My mind wandering back to the customer's words at the store, lights on all night like it's haunted, gossip or truth. Willow Creek thrived on the former, whispers at the post office about who was divorcing or whose kid got caught shoplifting at the Five and Dime. But this felt heavier, more personal, as if the house had singled me out. By the time we looped back, the mist had thickened into a drizzle, spotting my jacket and turning the sidewalk slick. I shook it off on the porch, toweling Buddy dry inside, but the damp clung to everything, mirroring the chill that had settled in my chest. The morning stretched empty. I tried the TV, some daytime talk show with canned laughter that grated against the quiet, but clicked it off after 10 minutes. Instead, I paced, ending up in the garage where boxes of old junk gathered dust, photo albums from before the divorce, tools I'd meant to organize. Rifling through them felt like digging into my own stagnation, but it beat staring at walls. Around noon, hunger drove me to the kitchen for a sandwich, ham and cheese on rye, eaten over the sink with the radio tuned to the local station. The weather report promised clearing skies by evening, but the forecaster's voice droned on about unrelated news. A fender bender on the interstate, the high school bake sale this weekend, normalcy, broadcast for anyone listening. But, as the afternoon wore on, isolation crept in, amplified by the rain pattering against the windows. I found myself glancing at the clock too often, the hands crawling toward dusk. Buddy sensed it, sticking close, his head resting on my knee as I sat in the living room with a notebook, jotting down what I remembered. First sighting Tuesday, the creek Wednesday, the call and tapping Thursday. Patterns emerged on the page, nights marked by escalation, days by denial. Was I imagining the progression? Or was the house responding? Its lights a Morse code I couldn't decode? The thought made my pen pause, ink blotting the paper. Paranoia had a way of blurring lines, turning coincidence into conspiracy. By 4, the rain had eased to a mist, and I couldn't stay inside any longer. Jacket on again, I stepped out, telling myself it was just a walk to clear my head. The street was deserted, puddles reflecting the slate sky, and my footsteps echoed too loudly on the wet pavement. I made it halfway down the block before the pull became irresistible. Just a closer look, I rationalized. No harm in that. The houses on either side were familiar sentinels. The red brick colonial with its basketball hoop, the split level where the twins played tag most evenings. But tonight, no laughter, no lights yet. Just me, walking toward the unknown. The house loomed larger with each step, its details sharpening. Chipped paint on the eaves, a shutter hanging loose on one hinge, the front door's brass knocker dulled by weather. Up close, the driveway's cracks spiderwebbed like veins, and the lawn smelled of wet earth. I stopped at the edge of the property, heart thudding steadily, and peered at the windows. Blank stares back at me, curtains absent, revealing empty rooms dusted with shadow. No for sale sign up close. It was closer to the porch, the agent's name faded but legible. Harlan Realty. Wait. Harlan? My last name? Coincidence? Or had I seen it before and forgotten? A gust stirred the bushes and I jumped, scanning the yard. Nothing. But the sense of being watched prickled stronger now. Not from the house, but from everywhere. The darkening trees, the empty street behind me. I took one step onto the gravel path, gravel crunching underfoot, and froze. From inside, a faint hum emanated like the low buzz of fluorescent tubes warming up. Not on yet, but preparing. My mouth went dry, and I backed away, nearly tripping over the curb. Buddy wasn't with me. I'd left him inside, safe. But now, alone. The isolation hit full force. The house wasn't just lit at night. It anticipated the dark, drawing me in with its vigil. I retreated to my porch, breath coming in shallow bursts, and locked the door behind me. The living room felt smaller, the walls closing in as twilight bled into the room. I drew the curtains tight, but slivers of light seeped through, and when full dark fell, I couldn't resist. Peering out, there it was, the blaze, brighter than before, casting a halo that reached halfway down the block, steady, unyielding. But tonight, something new. A soft flicker in the attic window, like a bulb straining, or a shadow passing briefly across the glow. I sank onto the couch, head in hands, the notebook forgotten on the coffee table. Doubt had evolved into certainty. The house knew I was watching, and it was watching back. Repetition bound us now, a silent dialogue of light and gaze. Isolation wrapped around me like the damp from the rain. Willow Creek's quiet no longer comforting, but confining. What came next? Another call? A knock? Or would I finally cross that line, step into the light to uncover what waited in the endless glow? As the clock ticked past 10, the hum returned. Not outside, but vibrating through the floorboards, faint and insistent. Buddy whined from his bed in the corner, and I reached for the phone, fingers hovering over the dial. Call who? The police? With what story? A house with lights on. No, this was mine to unravel, a psychological tether, pulling tighter. The night stretched ahead, pregnant with possibility, and for the first time, I wondered if turning away was even an option anymore. The hum persisted, a vibration that seemed to seep from the walls themselves, syncing with the unsteady rhythm of my pulse. I sat frozen on the couch, the fabric rough under my palms, Buddy's whine cutting through the low drone like a plea. The clock on the mantel read 10:23. Its second hand sweeping in relentless arcs. Outside, Willow Creek had fully surrendered to the night, the distant whoosh of a car on the highway, the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind, but nothing close. No footsteps, no neighbor's TV murmuring through thin walls, just that house, its glow pressing against my drawn curtains like an insistent knock. I forced myself to stand, legs unsteady, and crossed to the kitchen for a glass of water. The faucet ran cold over my fingers, but it did little to quench the dryness in my throat. As I drank, my eyes drifted to the back door, the one I'd checked twice already. Locked. Secure. Yet the hum felt directional now, pulling my gaze toward the front of the house, toward the street, toward it. I set the glass down harder than intended, the clink echoing in the empty space. Buddy padded after me, his nails clicking on the linoleum, and pressed against my leg as if to anchor us both. Pacing helped at first, a circuit from living room to hallway and back, my mind racing to catalogue the rationale. Faulty wiring in an old place like that, Victorian-era bones under the modern siding, probably shorting out every dusk. Or the realtor, my namesake, perhaps a distant cousin I'd never met, staging the lights on a timer to deter thieves. Harlan Realty. The coincidence gnawed at me, a loose thread in the fabric of normalcy. I'd looked it up earlier on my phone, the website sparse. A family-run outfit, small listings in the county, no photos of that address. But names repeat in towns like this. Harlan was common enough, like Smith or Johnson. Still, the explanations rang hollow against the mounting details. The early flicker that evening, the silhouette that vanished, the way the glow seemed to sharpen when I watched. Isolation amplified it all. Sarah had always said I retreated too far into my head after the split, turning molehills into mountains. But this wasn't introspection, it was observation. Cold and accumulating. I stopped pacing, sinking into the armchair by the window and parted the curtains just a fraction. The street stretched dark and empty, sodium lamps pooling yellow on the pavement. Halfway down the block, the halo from the house began, a diffuse light that blurred the edges of reality. Closer now in my mind's eye, the windows not just lit, but layered, as if multiple bulbs burned behind each pane, casting no warmth, only clarity. A car passed then, headlights sweeping the block like a searchlight, and for a heartbeat, the house's glow intensified in reflection, brighter, almost defiant. My breath caught. Was it the angle, the rain-slicked road? I leaned in, forehead against the cool glass, and that's when the flicker returned. Not in the attic this time, but downstairs, in what must have been the living room window, a subtle shift like fabric brushing glass, or a hand passing slowly across the light. No form, no face, just implication. The car faded into the distance, taillights winking out, and the glow settled back to its steady burn. But the image stuck, an after-image on my vision. Something inside, moving in rhythm with my stare. Buddy growled again, low and throaty, his body tense at my feet. I reached down to calm him, fingers threading through his fur, but my own hand trembled. The hum had evolved, no longer a vibration but a whisper of voices, indistinct, overlapping, like a radio tuned between stations. Not words exactly, but tones, urgent, expectant. I straightened, scanning the room for the source. The fridge? No, unplugged earlier in a fit of paranoia. The heat vents? Silent in the mild night. It was coming from the front, seeping under the door like smoke. I approached it slowly, ear pressed to the wood, the brass knob cold under my palm. Nothing, just the quiet amplification of my breathing. But when I twisted the knob and cracked the door an inch, the night air rushed in, carrying the faint ozone scent of electricity, and there, across the porch and down the steps, the house waited. From this proximity, the light was overwhelming, not blinding, but pervasive, washing the entire end of the street in a pallid sheen. Every window blazed, outlines sharp, and in the center one, the front parlor, I guessed. A pause in the glow, a void within the light, brief as a blink, then gone, as if whatever was there had turned away, only to return. I slammed the door shut, deadbolt sliding home with a finality that echoed my resolve. No more peeking, no more rationalizing. This was beyond wiring or timers. It was deliberate, a presence mirroring my isolation, feeding on the vigil we'd established. The house wasn't empty. It was occupied by absence, by the weight of what wasn't said or seen. And I, the reluctant witness, had become part of it. The hum faded as I backed away, but the certainty lingered. If I crossed that street, stepped into the glow, the loop would close. Answers perhaps, but at what unraveling cost? The rest of the night blurred into a tense watch. I didn't sleep, didn't move much beyond refilling Buddy's water and dimming the hall light. Dawn crept in around 5, grey light filtering through the edges of the curtains, softening the outlines of furniture into something almost forgiving. The hum ceased with the first bird call outside, a robin's trill piercing the hush. I rose stiffly, muscles aching from immobility, and brewed coffee by rote, the aroma filling the kitchen like a truce. Peering out, the street transformed, morning mist veiling the lawns, a jogger emerging from the fog, the house at the end subdued, windows dark and ordinary under the paling sky. Buddy and I walked that morning, but I kept to the creek trail, away from the block's end. The path wound through willows, their branches drooping over the water's lazy flow. And for a while, the rhythm of our steps drowned the echoes. Willow Creek stirred around us, school buses rumbling, the diner on Main Street firing up its grill, the world reclaiming its pulse. Work called later, I answered, voice steadier, promising to be in by 9. Routine as armor. But as I drove away, glancing in the rear view, the house receded, a white shape in the mirror. The lights would return tonight, I knew, steady, waiting. And I'd watch again, drawn by the tether, the psychological pull that blurred watcher and watched. Perhaps tomorrow I'd call the realtor, ask about Harlan, force a confrontation. Or maybe not. Maybe the glow was enough, a silent companion in the quiet suburb, echoing the voids we all carry. The engine hummed as I merged onto the highway, but in the quiet spaces between, the light lingered unblinking in my mind.